Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use your layers. Okay, automatically this should show up, but if it's not showing for you, this little icon up the top here with the little image that looks like it's got 3 stacks of paper is your layers. So if you click on that, you will notice that your layers disappear and reappear. You can also close it by using that dot there. Okay, so there's a number of things that you need to be aware of when you're using your layers. Okay, the very first thing I want to bring your attention to is your background layer. Now the only thing you can do with your background layer is to change the color. It just gives you one solid color all the way across the back. It should open up and default to white. So I'm going to leave it in that for this tutorial. Okay, which brings us to our first layer, and there's a number of things here and a lot of them do the same thing, that's just in different places. So the first thing I want to bring your attention to is this little dot here, this little dotted circle. If I hold down on that, you'll see that I have a bunch of options appear. Okay, so the very first one is hide your layer. So it might help if I draw something for you first. So here's my little circle I'm going to draw. And if I want to eyeball or hide it, it just means that it's disappeared. You can see in my view here that that's my layer with my dot. Let's give me a little preview. I can also press this little eyeball here, which reappears and makes it disappear. Okay, so that's your hide. I always call it the eyeball tab, a little bit cooler. Alright, which brings us to our duplicate. So if you wanted to create 2 layers that have the same thing, you can duplicate. You can also create a new layer, so there's a new layer above it. You can also delete the layer that you are currently on, so it goes away, which it's not going to do at this point because I have to have at least one layer. I can rename my layer, so if you're working on a document that has heaps of layers, you might like to name them so that it's easier to find the layer that you're working on. You can merge all of your layers, so say you're doing a face and you've got your eye on several different layers and you then want to merge them all together, you can do that. You can also just merge one at a time if you want to as well, and it'll always merge to the one below. And the lock layers. Now, you will notice that down here I also have the little lock layers. If you're familiar with using something like Photoshop, you'll know that the lock layer is usually will lock everything on your layer, meaning you can't do anything. So if that's what you're wanting to do, to lock the layer so you can't do anything, you need to go to your layer menu and then go say lock layers. And you'll notice now that my cursor has a black circle with a line through it, meaning that I can't do anything to this layer. If you are wanting to do something like a clipping mask, SketchBook doesn't really have a clipping mask option, but if you were to use this lock symbol here, it means that you are locking it so that you can only do things inside the area on that layer. So my circle that I have there, I can only do things inside that circle. So if I change my color so you can see the difference, you'll notice that once I try to draw, it'll only show inside the circle that was already there. So that's really good if you're trying to do shading inside a certain object and you don't want to have to go around and neaten the edges all the time. Okay, which brings us to the ones across the top here. Now, like I said before, with your layers, there are multiple places to go to do the same thing. So here is your quick option for a new layer. If you want to group your layers, if you want to import an image, so say I want to bring this image of an acorn and bumblebee in, I can do that there. Please watch my other tutorial on how to play around with images later on. And you can delete everything on that layer. So let's go to layer 1 and I can delete. So everything now on that layer has gone. You can see that my preview is now empty. Okay. You can also press the delete key on your keyboard as well if you don't want to go to the delete option there. And then brings you up to your layer menu. So in your layer menu, you've got your new layer, your image, new group, clear, duplicate, rename, layers, and delete. So you've got all those options again in here. Okay, which brings us to where it says normal here, this little drop down. Now these are your layer modes. Now each one of these will do something different and it will change the way that the layer looks. Okay, so I would recommend that you jump in there and just play around and see what happens. Okay. Which brings us to this last little thing here. Now, if you are used to using something like Photoshop, you will recognize the white and gray checkered space in the background. That often means that the background is transparent. So when we are talking about a layer and the transparency, if I change this to around 50%, you'll notice that my circle has now lightened. And if I do that again down to 20%, it's even lighter. Now, if I change my mind, I'm like, no, I want to go higher, I can still do that. I can go back to 100% and bring it back to full color. The only other thing you need to be aware of is that you can bring your layers up and down. So if I want to bring them up, I need to press this button, click, and then drag. And you'll notice that a blue line reappears where I want to drop it. Okay, you can also move your layers around on your screen. So if I want to work on this side of my document, I can move my layers out of the way. I can also completely close them if I'm working on one layer and I don't want that in my way at all. And there you have it. That's how you can play around with your layers. The only other thing I want you to be aware of, if you're not familiar with layers at all, and why do we want to have layers? It's so that you can do things on different layers and they're not going to interfere with each other. So let's just say I'm going to do I've got my light red circle on layer 1. I'm now going to draw a red circle on layer 5, because I've made a bunch of layers now. You'll notice that I've now got a preview there of my little red icon. If I want to move this, and again, please jump over and have a look at my other tutorials on how to do these things. You can see that I can resize that and I can move it over here without interrupting my previous drawing. And you can do that with hundreds of layers, as many layers as you want to work with. So it just means that I can then play around with this. So let's say I wanted to then I wanted to delete this part of my circle. I then don't have to worry about messing around with the other layer that I already have because they're on separate layers, which is really, really good. And then I decide I want to have that behind my grey circle. I can just move that layer so it's now behind. So think of layers like a stack of papers. Whatever's on top is the thing you're going to see first. Okay? All right, enjoy guys. Have fun with your layers.